Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well today. I am so incredibly excited to be able to do this type of video for you. This is a video where you are going to have the ability to see other people who have done more public speaking, but get a couple of insights in terms of strategies and techniques that you can use in your everyday conversations that will help you communicate at a higher level than your peers. This video is going to be something that you have not seen on YouTube. I guarantee you have not seen on YouTube. This is a video that is going to be unbiased. I have watched a lot of videos out there as it relates to debate analysis, how they communicate it, body language, and etc. There always is some little bit of bias there, but here with me, I'm not biased. So you're going to learn different techniques that they've done and some things that maybe they should not have done that will help you present yourself as a executive when you are speaking. Now, I want to give a shout out to my amazing husband because he knows I've been wanting to do a video like this for years in terms of being able to compare commentaries and provide insights that can help average people be able to speak better. And so I just appreciate my amazing husband for that. Okay, so if you're new to me, my name is Dr. Jacinta Lamatai. I am the CEO and founder of Excite Excellence Incorporated. And guess what? We're going to have a lot of fun today. And I need to know in the comments below, do me a huge favor. I need to know if you like this type of video. There's different leaders in the world. I'd be happy to take a look at any leader from any country, how they're communicating and getting some insights to help you be able to communicate better. But I need to know if you like this video. If you do, definitely put something in the comments below. Let me know you want to see more of it. Like the video, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things. Alrighty, let me know. We're going to have some fun today. So give me just a moment. Let me switch everything over to where we need to be. All right. So in this segment, this is the very beginning of the debate. I'm not going through the entire debate. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that can help you. But if you want me to go into more detail, I will. So let's just watch this together. Let's look at the reactions of both Vice President Kamala Harris. She's actually speaking in this segment, and former President Donald Trump. And let's see what we can learn from both of them. How can we use some of the gestures, maybe some of the speaking tactics that they have used to communicate at a higher level? Regardless of how you feel about either one of them, this is just the purpose of education only, just to help you become a better speaker. So let's see how it goes.
And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the
So one thing I want to add in this very first segment, if you notice, if we're focusing on Vice President Kamala Harris speaking, is that she's speaking, she's looking directly at the camera, which is always very helpful when you are doing and having conversations with, let's say, one-on-one, or even if you're having conversations in a group setting, making sure that you're making eye contact with as many people as possible is very helpful. When you are in a very large setting of people, you can't make eye contact with every single person. It's completely impossible for you to do that if it's a really big group. However, what you can do is you can turn your head to the right, turn your head center, turn your head to the left. So the people that are in that background or in those vicinities of where you're looking will be able to feel like you're talking to them. So looking in the camera is very, very important to at least be able to establish some relationship or some type of connection with the people you're talking to. The one thing I would say that she did for me, as being unbiased, is she moved her hands a lot. I mean, her hands were moving quite a bit during her response time frame. And doing that can be really distracting. It can be very, very, very distracting when you're talking to other people. So just keep that in mind. When you're using your gestures and using your hands, they should be very purposeful. If there's something that you're trying to say, then say it with your hands. Or if you're trying to make a big statement, maybe use your hands and raise them up a bit. But if you're just talking with your hands, sometimes it can be really, very, very distracting. I would say for the former president, he's pretty stoic. He kind of has that look like he's just looking, like he's just kind of listening to what's being said. There's a couple of times where you saw his eyes moving. It sounds like it appeared as if he was listening to what was actually being said by Vice President Kamala Harris. But obviously, he's not saying anything right now. Sometimes when people are talking, it is best for you just to look like you're a statue to a certain extent, because you want to show that you're listening. You're not really showing a lot of emotion, which in situations of debates and etc., and even in your day-to-day conversations, depending on what's going on, you can be very emotional, but you want to try to control those emotions. So that's something that I see in this particular clip. All right, let's continue.
The largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
So, one thing I want to mention in this particular segment is that there was a change in the tone of her voice when she talked about $1 billion tax credit. It's very slight, but you'll have to adapt this in your day to day conversations when you are trying to make a sharp contrast against maybe a different ideal that you may have, or if you want to say something that has or can have more of an impact. The tone of voice when she's talking about her family member or them taking care of her mother was taking care of her and her sister, and there was another person that owned a small business. The voice was different. It was more happy, jovial. But you saw when she said my opponent, like the voice, her tone of voice went down. And so you can use that strategy if you have a conversation that you're having that there's a difference of opinion where you need to make a point, where you need to make a sharp contrast into what is being said. Now, the one thing I will point out in this particular scenario is that with the former president, when she mentioned about billionaire tax cuts, that in my view would be triggering, because you're saying something that does not sound positive to somebody about something that maybe they're planning to do. He did not make a response. He shifted his gait a bit. You could tell it probably was a bit annoying to hear that. But in terms of his facial expression, I didn't really see a big change there. So that's something to keep in mind. You will have scenarios, especially as a professional, that will come up where people will disagree with you. People will disagree with you. They don't like what you say. They may even say something that is very contentious to you. And how you respond is very, very, very important in terms of how you are presenting yourself as a leader. If you respond in an emotional manner, which there's a couple of scenarios I think I'll be able to show you in this particular segment that I'm showing you for the video, where you can say something and make somebody feel upset and they visibly show that they're upset. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Don't show your emotions. Be very stoic, because that just shows there's a certain amount of control that you have about what's being said and how people may respond to you. All righty. So let's go back. Let's look at another segment, and let me see if I can find one where the former president is speaking. Give me just a second. Okay.
Destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people.
Okay, in this segment, the former president was speaking. And if you noticed, when he was speaking in this segment, I've seen him speak in different settings. It was very monotone, and monotone is not very engaging, if that makes sense. There usually is some inflection in the voice, and it could have been at the beginning of the debate. I don't know. That's not the purpose of it. But if you want to really sound like you're not really excited about something, using a monotone voice is a way to do it. I personally have done this a couple of times, depending on the topic. If it's something I'm not quite interested in, my tone of voice will be pretty consistent. And I'm just showing that this is something I'm maybe not so interested in. Now, the use of statistics is always very, very helpful when you are speaking to the public. He did use several statistics in this particular setting, which is a good way to show some level of credibility, that you do have some knowledge base here about what you are trying to actually say. So using statistics in your day-to-day conversations, or if you're doing a presentation or having a discussion with someone, is good. I mentioned this in several of my YouTube videos. Having numbers in the back of your head is extremely important when you are trying to set yourself apart. Most people do not collect that data in their head. They may hear numbers and it just goes boop, boop, in and out the ear. But if you're able to retain some of those numbers about relevant topics, it really does show a different level and a different class of person. So using statistics is something great I would recommend to do. Now, the one other thing I wanted to mention in this particular segment, we talked about triggering. I mentioned that a few moments ago. So in this particular situation where he was talking about how the economy is horrible and etc., if you notice and recall that Vice President Kamala Harris, she did kind of shift and she kind of made a face. Well, I mean, if you are trying to show more emotional control, you probably don't want to do that. Somebody may say something, as I mentioned, that's going to make you mad and going to upset you to just the highest level. But if you can control your facial expressions, it says a lot about you as a character. Now, are there times when you need to show facial expressions? Absolutely, you do. But it can't be with every single comment that's being made about something that you don't like where you show a facial expression. There's times when you strategically should show a facial expression, but you should have some type of strategy with it. When you're making a point or you're saying something specifically and you want to really show that you don't like it, then that's a good time to do it. But when someone says something just because you hear something you just don't like every single time, you probably, you don't want to, you probably would not, it just doesn't look like you are in control. So that's just my perspective on that. Okay, let's find another segment here where we can talk about that.
If he were elected again, I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit.
So this was another instance where there's a couple things I wanted to pull out of this. And there's so much to pull out of these particular conversations in this debate. I just can't do it all. But I want to pull out just some things that I think that will probably help you when you're trying to deliver your message. At the beginning, when Vice President Kamala Harris moved her arm and said, I pledge to you, that is a purposeful gesture, if that makes sense. When I mentioned at the very beginning, when her hands were just kind of going, I mean, she was just talking with her hands. Those are not purposeful gestures. But when you say, I pledge to you, you see my hand is going out here. That's a purposeful gesture. A purposeful gesture means a gesture with your hands, with your head, with your mouth, with your eyes, or however you're looking, that is in direct alignment with what you are trying to say. I pledge to you. She's pointing to you, to the audience. That was very, very helpful. And when you're speaking and talking to other people, there's different times when you want to use different gestures. If you have questions about that, let me know in the comments, or when you might want to use a certain gesture. But that was a gesture to use to show that her body language was in alignment with what she was trying to say. Now, with the former president, if you notice, former President Donald Trump, there was a part where, excuse me, he had pointed his hands off towards her. That's a purposeful gesture. He showed directly that I'm talking about you and I'm pointing my hand to you. So that's a purposeful gesture as well. Another thing that came up before, and I'm just highlighting this because it is very important, is when there's something that was said specifically about the economy and etc., Vice President Kamala Harris showed expression of her face in terms of her not liking it. And as I mentioned, it's okay to do that, but just not on every single thing that you hear that you don't agree with. There's strategic times to do that. It's really important when you're trying to communicate at a higher level than your peers that I want you to do, that you want to try to control your emotions. Now, I want to hear from you because we've looked at a couple of snippets of the debate so far. What are your thoughts? Like, are you learning something from this? Are you gaining some insight? Is there something else you want to learn more about? What do you think? What do you think? I really want to hear from you because these videos, they do take time to put together, and I want to know if you're learning something. That's most important. Are you learning something? And is there something that you can use today based on what you see that you can start to help you communicate at a higher level? All right. Let's see what else I had on here that I wanted to talk to you about. I think we're going to fast forward just a little bit. Okay, yes. Just a moment. All right, here's another segment.
No plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have
So this is interesting in how she's speaking to the audience, but she's looking at the former president. It's good to be able to have that dialogue between two people, because if you are in a setting where, let's say you have a panel discussion, you need to be able to have the ability to speak to your audience that's right in front of you, but you also need to be able to speak to your panel too. So being able to navigate those two with ease, as she did in this particular scenario, is a good technique, a good strategy to have if you're doing a presentation or you have a panel where you somewhat have two different audiences. You have an audience right beside you, and you have an audience, like a big audience there. So doing those with ease, making that transition, being able to move your head, ladies, you got to move your head, is very, very helpful. And the other part that we mentioned before is just the talking with the hands. It just has to be a purposeful gesture. There's one part of it that was purposeful from what I saw when she talked about the best the best. She used her fingers like the best. When people say something's like, oh, this is delicious, something like that. She used her hands. You could tell that was more of a purposeful type of gesture. There's another gesture, I believe, that's coming up here in just a few moments from the former president that I do want to show you also. That's a purposeful gesture that you can use in your everyday conversations, depending on what you're trying to say.
Described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. I gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh.
Now, I will say this particular segment that was said, the one thing I would pull out about it when in this particular scenario is that the mic was obviously off, but he was still speaking. That is a way for you to show that I have something to say. Regardless if the mic is on or if the mic is off, I'm still going to say what I have to say. And so it just depends on your setting. You may not have a presidential debate like this, but there are times where you may need to speak up just a little bit to get your point across. The other thing I wanted to mention in this case is that he used his hands. You couldn't really see him that much. So when you are in a setting where, let's say, if you're doing a video presentation or something along those lines, or you're on camera, your hands, you need to have them up just a little bit if you're planning to use them. I know he was using his hands. I could see him moving kind of in the way that I was doing it here, where it's at the bottom. It's hard to see, but hands kind of need to come up a little bit more so we can see what's going on. Kamala Harris, she did that pretty well. I mean, her hands were up. Now, sometimes in this particular case, there was a use of sarcasm that is supposed to be a form of humor in this particular segment. And I would have to say that there are times when you need to use humor, and the humor can be sarcastic depending on what type of point you're trying to make, right? So in this particular setting, you heard him say her plan is like 4 sentences, but it was actually 4 words, and it was run, spot, run. So when I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, run, spot, run. Ouch. That is a way to say something to make somebody mad. But the use of sarcasm and the use of humor, it can be used tactfully in different ways. It just depends on the scenario and what it is that you plan on trying to say. Okay. So I hope that information was helpful to you as it relates to this segment. Changing your tone of voice, you notice his voice changed, the tone changed also. As I mentioned, using your tone of voice is very important. You can say something really loud, like you're trying to get someone's attention, or you can go back down and say something in a way that is not as loud. That in itself will help you to stand apart when you're communicating to other people, because how you use your voice, how high you go, how low you go, how soft you go, can impact your message and can help you make your message stand out. All right. I think I have maybe one more. I think we're just continuing from this segment, and then I want to get your thoughts.
We'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on.
Sometimes when something is being said and you don't want to interrupt someone, you have to shake your head. I mean, you're basically in this particular segment, former President Donald Trump is mentioning and shaking his head. No, I don't agree with that. And when you have a situation where someone is saying something to you and you don't agree, but they're talking, but you don't want to be that rude person to say, no, stop talking. A simple gesture is sufficient to let that person know that, no, I don't agree. And I think that was a interesting move, an interesting gesture to do without having to cut somebody off and say, no, I don't agree with you. Just a simple shake of your head is something that's helpful. Okay, well, I hope that this information was helpful for you. I know this was a bit of a longer video for me. There's still a lot more things that I wanted to talk about, as it relates to this particular debate. But I don't want to take forever and watch the whole thing. I know y'all watched it, you probably did, but I hope the information was helpful. I do want to know from you, what was your biggest takeaway from the analysis of how they communicated? And then what is the one technique that you want to try to incorporate in your day-to-day communications that can help you stand out as a woman in leadership? Put it in the comments below. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. And if you felt like this was helpful, feel free to share this video with other professional women who are in leadership roles that might want to get some additional insight in terms of how they can maybe communicate better as leaders. And if you want some customized help, reach out to me. I have a communication skills audit where I will sit down with you virtually and look at how you're communicating and determine what are some strategies, what are some techniques that you can do to help you communicate at a higher level than your peers that can help you to advance in your career, generate more income, and etc. So just reach out to me for the communication skills audit. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. I look forward to seeing you all soon, and bye for now.